Well, I'd like to begin by welcoming everyone to our first SCRAP meeting of the fiscal year. So for those who are new, SCRAP stands for Standard Cataloging Rules and Practice. So my name is Rachel Fisher, and I've introduced myself to you before. I am the CCS staff liaison. We're also joined by Virginia Seward, who's also a CCS staff member. And so for those who are new, what we will be doing throughout the year is discussing the cataloging practices related to the cataloging wiki in order to make recommendations for changes. So as you've noticed on the agenda, we'll be talking about cataloging wiki pages that need to be reviewed and the bibliographic input standards today. So I'd like to begin by allowing everyone to introduce themselves. So we'll start by going down the staff roster. Lynn?
Oh, can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, wonderful. Good morning, everybody. I'm Lynn Rubio. I'm the Acquisitions and Cataloging Manager at the Des Plaines Public Library.
Tammy hasn't arrived yet, so we can move on to John.
John LaValle, cataloger at the Des Plaines Library.
Victoria is not able to make it because of the NELS budget meeting. Next is Adrian.
Hi, Adrian Galindo. I'm the lead cataloger at Palatine.
And next is Lynn Crambier.
Hi, I'm the cataloger at Lake Forest Library.
And Linda.
Hi, I'm the tech manager at Terry.
Great. Okay, so one thing I do want to point out now is that we do have a folder that we can use in SharePoint. The link is in the agenda. This will contain any documents, minutes, agendas, and the roster, any other related documents we need to discuss throughout the year. So if you do want to put anything in it or edit anything, you should be able to. It should allow anyone to have access to it to edit it as well. So one thing I forgot to do last year was to approve the minutes, but there have been no additions to the minutes from previous years when I send them out. So do we still want to do that to just add anything if anything is missing and then not discuss them during the next meeting? Or do you want to go through the formal process of approving the minutes?
I don't feel like we need to go through the formal process, but it's a, I'd be willing to do that if people feel it's necessary.
Okay, well, then we will continue to not approve the minutes and just ask for any additions via the listserv. Okay, so next on our agenda are some topics to review from the cataloging wiki that we have not finished discussing from last year. The first one is the uniform titles page. Virginia had agreed to do some research into it. I believe that the issue was related to local practices. We wanted to decide if there were any actual local practices on the uniform title page and what needs to be kept on the page and what should be removed.
Me to
Virginia?
go on? Yeah, I kind of reviewed it. A lot of this, some of these actually probably needs to be updated because like a couple of these examples are from the original cataloging manual, the CCS cataloging manual before we went over to the wiki. So they're relatively old, like the elves and the shoemaker. And I think that there's another one down here with the fairy tale section. That too is, I guess I can't, can I move my screen? No, I guess and things like that. So there might be something like down there, I don't know, down by the Grimm's fairy tale section, I think that the Hansel and Gretel, maybe not, something else is familiar to me that I had Rachel actually print out, send me a copy of the old manual because I'm still working remotely. But anyway, and some of those things do need to be updated. There's also here in Grimm's Fairy Tales, there's something I mentioned about provisions of AACR2. I think we might want to remove that too. I did try to do some literature searching on fairy tales to see if we're cataloging everything right. It's hard to find information on people specifically how to catalog a fairy tale. We're actually one of the top hits. Our wiki's actually one of the top hits on the Google when I did a Google search. So I was saying, I don't think I need to do that one. And I found something from LC from 2015, but that's kind of old too, how to catalog fairy tales. So I did some literature searching and I've got some numbers that I've got some examples that could be used. That could maybe be better, newer examples because I did a literature search both on OCLC and CCS for like fairy tales in 2020 to see what the more current practices were and how people were cataloging. It seems basically a lot of this is the same thing, especially the Grimm's fairy tales. You don't see as many people using giving Jacob and Wilhelm Grimm uniform title. I mean, whatchamacallit, 700s as added entries. So I don't know if you really need that as much anymore as you used to. But I think really basically, I don't think there's any really local practices unless there's something people really want. I think using provisions of RGA, here I got ACR2 on my mind. RGA like 6.22, whatever it was at the top, and some other, I think 17.7, I think I wrote down my self notes and stuff, might work, maybe 7.7, but whatever. I've got my notes somewhere. That's about all. Anybody have any questions or any ideas?
I think the main question then is that since the wiki is supposed to represent local practices, how much of this should actually be kept and how much should be removed?
To me, it's probably good to have a few examples, but you might not need as many as you have, and then make newer examples.
Well, the examples should probably would be better on the training site.
Well, we don't want to add cataloging rules to the training site right now.
Right.
But do you mean the local practices course that I created, or
No, if we were keeping examples, we try not to. Well, nothing on this page is local practice except maybe tracing the Grimm brothers, which that was just Roger making more work for us. I don't think we ever. I don't think that was ever really a thing.
Yeah, you don't really see that much anymore anyway in the current stuff. Once in a while you do, but it's more exactly what they've written or something, the translation of their stuff instead of, or maybe a compilation of their stuff.
Right. And then if you know, if it's a 400-page book, then yeah, you trace them. But if it's just, you know, well, whatever the example is down there, it's just one story. They didn't write it,
Right.
and they don't need to be traced.
No, that really they
Yeah.
don't.
And at that point, this page is all national practice.
So if we're following what, like the purpose of this wiki, then we don't need this page? Is that what that sounds reasonable.
Great. Well, we do have other pages that have national practices on them.
Yeah, and ideally we shouldn't have any, but because if we're keeping national practice and then it changes, then we have to keep changing.
And you have to update it.
I mean, if it, you know, we have made exceptions for confusing rules or rules that are hard to find, which for me and RDA is all of them, but that's a different story. But that, in that case, you know, we could just provide links. And even then, that's kind of more training. So I don't see anything on this page that needs to be counted.
I couldn't hear you, John. Could you come closer to the mic?
Sure, I don't see anything on this page that needs to be counted. It isn't just cataloging.
Are people just, are catalogers used to seeing this page here? Do they refer to it?
I would say no.
Linda, it's hard to hear you if you're trying to speak. There's like a sound, like a white noise.
Oh. That any better? No.
Not really. I can hear you. There's a white noise that's
That's
louder.
Yeah, I guess I would just say I agree with John. But I don't think that is important.
Linda, do you have the ability to type what you were saying? I couldn't hear you.
I think she was just saying she could agreed with John.
Okay. That we don't need the page and can delete it? Okay. Does anyone else have an opinion? Is it okay if we delete the page?
Yeah, if there's truly nothing that is specific to our local practices, then I'm in favor of deleting it.
Okay. Okay. Sounds good. At some point, should we then this year go through the rest of the pages that are in the national practices category to discuss them and see if additional pages need to be deleted?
Absolutely, or at the very least, take out national practices on the page.
Yeah, I agree.
I agree.
For the benefit of the new people on Scrap, this was something that I brought up. In my mind, our manual here that we're looking at really should just be local practices. It's for new, well, it's for new people, you know, you say, okay, you know how to catalog. Now here's how we do it. In my mind, that's what this was for. It hasn't always been that way, but that's how I see it.
Okay. Our next item on the agenda is the illegal aliens subject heading page. So I have added our table of terms that will be replacing, or that have already replaced the illegal alien subject headings, and described the decision. Is there anything else that should be added to this page?
Just so I'm clear about how this works, if someone were to search illegal aliens in the subject field of the catalog, would that then bring up undocumented immigrants as a subject? Would it be like, is it part of a 4XX field in the authority record?
No, not anymore. Deborah didn't want it. Deborah asked that the references for illegal aliens be deleted because she felt that we're trying to get away from the term. And if you saw the term in the catalog, it might be confusing. I really wanted to put references in, put 450s for the previous things, because that's how you do it when you do NACO or SACO, that's how you do it. And that's how I do it nationally, but Deborah said she didn't want it, so.
Yeah,
So
because illegal aliens, it wouldn't appear, right? It would just.
it could be in your facets on your left, in your pack. It could be over there in your previous searches or whatever. When you're doing in the pack, there should be, there might be something over in the left that might be showing, and that, I think that's what she was afraid of. I don't know. I have no idea.
Should we add that information about the 450 being removed or not existing in the authority record on this page?
That might be a good thing to, in case people have questions or something. I don't know if the catalogers would look, maybe they would use it, but not everybody else might though. Regular searcher in the pack might not though.
Yeah, I agree. That's a good idea, just so that, because it's not standard practice.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tammy said that we might also want to let the reference desk workers know that the reference in the 450 is not in the records. Okay. I will add that before our next meeting, before the CAM meeting. Okay, so the next topic is a study program information note. This basically just describes what is being added to the record by Marchive, and also describes the format that it should appear if they are in OCLC records. So if you see errors in the records, you're welcome to correct it, but it's not required. So this is just a reference, but not a requirement. Is there anything else that needs to be added to this? Are you willing to approve it as it is written?
Yes. That's Lynn. Yes.
Great. We'll move on. Okay, we had some interesting suggestions for the software, computer games, and video games page for virtual reality. So one of them was just a new note that they suggested we added that includes the PlayStation VR, or what they would like to add to their note. And also a suggestion that if PlayStation VR is required, add a second row for, or I should say a second tag for the system. So this should include a tag for PlayStation 4 or PlayStation 5 and PlayStation VR. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So I just need to correct the wording a bit. One other suggestion that they wanted to add was to add a requirement for a virtual reality subject heading. How do you feel about that?
Well, it would be a genre heading, right?
Yeah,
That's what I was going to say too, Jen.
it should
I
be.
forgot to write down on my notes the actual heading they suggested, but it was not a genre heading. It was a 650 for virtual reality.
Also, the
But it makes
750
sense that. Sorry, what were you saying, John?
Oh, the 753 is also indexed as a subject. Ideally, it would have been genre, but we don't have separate indexes. So I'm wondering what is different about virtual reality with any other video game.
The main difference is that it requires two systems. It requires the PlayStation 4, plus it requires, well, it's not like a system, but it requires the virtual reality goggles,
Okay.
the glasses. So they're like two separate pieces.
And I'm just asking because I've never ever played a video game, so I don't know how these work. But how is this different than any other requirement for a video game? Like you need a joystick or you need 50 gig of memory.
I think just the sense of reality is different, that you're being immersed in it by putting on the glasses as opposed to playing it on a screen.
Did this make a difference when somebody's trying to run a report on how many VR games they have? You're not gonna, you wouldn't pick it up in the 300, right? So if you had I agree it should be more a genre than a subject, but.
Right, a genre heading makes sense.
Because it's what it is. Not.
Does the
Not what it's
OLAC,
about.
is there something in the OLAC list of video game genres?
It doesn't look like it. No. So Brad was just commenting that it's a more specialized accessory that not everyone has, and Violet was commenting that it's definitely different. Even avid gamers make a distinction for the VR games. So I'm not sure if there's a LCGFT genre heading for it.
Sir Alice.
It looks like there's just LCSH headings for virtual reality. So we do need to make a local heading for the genre. Would we just want it to be a local heading of a virtual reality game?
Video games?
Virtual reality video game?
Games like OLAC.
Okay, virtual reality video games.
Sounds good.
Tammy says that sounds good. Mm. Okay. So there's a space between video and games. Do you want to do a motion to approve this? Linda, motions to approve. Does anyone second the motion?
I second.
And Lynn K seconds it. Does anyone not approve the motion? Sounds like we have unanimous approval of the motion. To add the genre heading virtual reality video games. Great. Let's now move on to Homosaurus. So we have now about 30 authority records for Homosaurus, and the headings have been added to more than 200 records. And one person has started to, or I just saw one usage of a subdivision for the literary form for fiction, but that has not been something we've discussed yet, and has not been added to our draft page. So is this something that we'd want to add to the page as a local practice, or is this something we would not want to allow as a local practice?
What was the example?
Let me find that. I think it was, I know it was a subdivision for fiction.
I forget.
On the wiki, there's not yet a list of terms that are currently being used. Is that something that's going to be added, or are we just going to keep it to headings to avoid?
We can add a link to an ongoing document that I can update, but I have also added this SQL query to find the Homosaurus records in the Authority Records Find tool. So this doesn't need to be changed at all. You can just press search. And so we have now
Yeah.
34
you go.
records. So the one with the subdivision is lesbian relationships fiction.
And just go up, click up on the B up there at the top. Will show you the bib record.
So we have it right here.
There was another one I think I might have deleted because I wasn't sure if it, but there was another one also like that. We had a division fiction. I think I deleted it. I kept the heading fiction, so it would link properly.
Was there something, I don't know, I guess I felt when I looked at that record, it looked a little, it looked repetitive. Is there something about, is there something not covered in lesbians fiction and, you know, the two genre headings are there, lesbian fiction and romance fiction, they're already there. Is that lesbian relationships fiction, does it inform us more, or is it, I don't know. When I look at it, it just seems, I guess, repetitive to me. But that's my opinion. And I don't do this on a regular basis. So that's just, I guess, my question that I'm putting to you all is dividing that out like that necessary, or do we already have enough subject and genre headings to express what we're trying to express there?
I agree with my boss. It does seem redundant, although that's which is part of a bigger issue of how are we applying this new thesaurus? Is it in addition to or instead of what we already have?
Supposed to enhance the bibliographical record.
I mean, if I cataloged that, never in a million years would I think that heading was necessary, because I feel like it's already covered. It just wouldn't occur to me to go further.
Right. So I did add a statement saying that the headings from Homosaurus should not be added if they're an exact duplicate, but it is potentially something that will happen, that a similar heading like lesbian relationships could be added to a record if they're specifically searching for it. And I think it could be added. So would we want to try to add additional statements saying that similar enough headings like lesbian relationships don't need to be added, or should we just leave it as an exact match should not be added.
I think we will want to limit ourselves to using Homosaurus for concepts that just can't be captured by LCHS. And I think I may well have been the one to add that subject heading. I don't remember, but I think Lynn brings up a good point, and I don't think we should be throwing these new subject terms in there willy-nilly.
I really agree with that concept of using it when we don't already have those terms and those concepts available to us. That seems like the power of this tool.
Okay.
And when we start adding thesauruses, if we're not all using them, then you get incomplete results. There's nothing wrong with that new heading, but if only a couple libraries are using it,
Tammy asks, is there a difference between a book being about being a lesbian where there is nothing major in the book about an actual relationship?
I think there were other terms in that record that indicated that it was about a relationship. I think maybe same-sex marriage was a subject heading in that record.
It was, and then there was also a genre heading of romance fiction.
Okay, so so far what I have for this statement is when adding Homosaurus headings to records, do not delete the equivalent LCSH terms if the LCSH term is the same as the Homosaurus term. It is unnecessary to add the Homosaurus term to the record. You can use your cataloger's judgment to decide when to add the Homosaurus terms to the records. So do you have any suggestions of how I should update that statement?
well, instead of saying don't delete LCSH, are we saying don't add Homosaurus?
We're just saying not to add it only in case it's an exact duplicate of LCSH at the moment. Should we change it to if it's an exact duplicate of the concept that's already in the record?
Yeah, I think so.
Okay.
Maybe don't say exact.
So I could say if the LCSH term is the same as the Homosaurus term, I don't know, Deborah might want to weigh in on this topic.
Maybe something like if it doesn't enhance access or understanding or something along those lines.
Redundant.
Okay, I'll think about that and talk to Deborah about it. She may want to weigh in on how that is written. Okay, so back to the literary subdivisions. Did we want to allow that or not?
If they're being used as genre, oh no, if they're being used as subject headings, they should have the same subdivisions as the other subject headings in the record.
And they won't authorize correctly, but that's all right.
Now,
Yeah, I do think it would be weird to apply different rules to this new vocabulary. That would be strange, I think.
Okay. That makes sense. Should we continue to discuss this at the next meeting after I've updated the page? Or did you want to vote on the motion to approve it now?
Well, I guess my question would be, Virginia, does it make a difference that it won't authorize correctly? I mean, does that cause problems?
It doesn't really cause problems in the catalog itself. It's just how Players works weird. I'll say it. Players authority to authorize a heading, it needs the whole string has to be authority record has to be for a whole string. Whereas other systems that we've used and before, you could just tell it just authorize off of like subfield A, like when we were using Symphony. So that means either I can add authority if it's going to be used a lot. And that's what I do a lot with like things that have juvenile fiction, something I do authorize it locally just because there's so many of them there. A term that's has a lot of headings under it. I do authorize it locally. If I'm authorizing, it doesn't really matter. I can just authorize them too.
In that case, though, it seems like if if you were to do that SQL search for all the headings currently in use, that it could get a little messy and unwieldy. If you have, well, for example, lesbian relationships, fiction, lesbian relationships, poetry, and so on. But I guess I don't feel very strongly, but I think that we should maybe just consider both sides of that.
So I think that if we do switch to Vega, the issue of authorizing the headings won't be as important because of how it works, that if it just sees a local subject heading, it creates its own authority record behind the scenes in a way and doesn't use our local ones at the moment, although we're trying to talk to them about trying to use our local headings. That what it does is instead of showing the headings as they appear in the record, it creates like a list of books that all have those headings in them below the work records so that you can click on it like a record set or a showcase.
I've seen it do. I've seen it done on Vega too. It does use the local authority record because I was checking some of my illegal aliens in Vega yesterday. I guess the children of illegal aliens or whatever it was. And then I had authorized with juvenile literature fiction. And that showed up in the little showcase you were just talking about with all the things. So I think it does use it to a certain extent too.
Right. Yeah. So I think it would definitely work out well in Vega because of how it creates those showcases for each subject heading below it. So I will edit the page and then we can come back to this and review it next meeting.
Before we move on from Homosaurus,
Sure.
I did have a question about a couple of the genre terms. So I think we have queer fiction as a genre term. And in looking at the Homosaurus website, a broader term is fiction parens LGBTQ.
Okay.
And I'm wondering, and there's no scope notes. So I'm wondering how queer fiction was chosen over the hierarchical term. And I don't know, there may be other cases of this. And I think that maybe we need to decide how that's, chosen.
It's a good idea. Someone else mentioned the amount of acronyms, like there's just LGBT, LGBI, there's like different variations and not just like LGBTQ. And if we should just choose one or follow the scope note of when to use it in the record.
I don't think there is a scope note, or at least I haven't seen any in the terms that I've looked at yet. And I think where I see the biggest conflict is between queer and LGBTQ.
Right.
I mean, they, for all intents and purposes, they mean the same thing.
So in this case, I think one of the things I thought about was when I would choose queer would be that if it's in the title or summary, and this is in the summary. And so this is, but here I could also see them choosing bisexual fiction as a genre. Because that's also an option. Would that make sense to choose queer if it's in the summary or title?
I think I'm more inclined to follow the structure that Homosaurus has created and just apply the broadest term that makes sense, and to not get more specific unless necessary. But I'd be curious about what others think on that.
I think I agree with you in that, like I would look at this, at the summary and think, yeah, it's right there in the summary, let's choose queer fiction. But the idea that staying broad unless there's a reason to narrow it keeps that sort of accessibility there. It makes it just a little more accessible. Maybe, I don't know. That's, I think that makes sense as a practice, but is it going to be easy to apply across the board for all of us?
It's hard to provide guidance on when to choose specific headings. One of the things I did find out about queer is that there really are a lot of patrons that search for the term. So there have been like 165 searches for queer that happened in the last 3 years, which is a fairly large amount compared to some of the other Homosaurus terms. There are only about like 65 for non-binary. So
do you have a sense of how often LGBTQ is searched?
I did not asked Bob to look for that one yet. I can get that information from him. So I think it's kind of hard to add some of these universally, unless we use the guidance of like maybe using the words that match the title and summary.
I think where I get hung up is, you know, if you search LGBTQ fiction, you may get different results than if you search queer fiction, depending on which ones were applied to which records. And ideally, we wouldn't want that to happen.
If I had looked at this record and saw the subject heading bisexual women fiction, I would have added the genre heading bisexual fiction. But I don't see that here.
I would too.
And I don't know if, and to me, that seems like a narrower term of either LGBTQ fiction or queer fiction. So
It is narrower.
Okay. So it seems to me in this case, those other headings aren't appropriate. Even though it says queer in the summary, unless bisexual women is not the right subject heading.
Yeah, it's tough, right? Because you want to apply the term that best describes the book, but you know, you also want to think about how people are searching. Are people more likely to search bisexual fiction, or are they more likely to search, you know, queer fiction? And I think it's tough because you don't want to create a barrier in any way.
Right. Most people do search for known titles. So they have an idea of a book and that they've already read about and want to read it. So they'll search for it. But I think that when they do search for things without the title, it might be a shorter version. Like they'll just search for the word bisexual, or a lot of people just search for trans and not transgender, which is a Homosaurus term too.
Well, we're never going to be able to account for every possible search term in the bib records. That's what the authority file is for.
And we're also, and this is everybody's still learning how to use this, how to apply these headings too. Maybe that those of us who are going to that training next week might have a little more guidance, you know. So this is a new, so, you know, you can't be too picky on everybody's cataloging yet.
Maybe we should come back to this until after that training.
It's a good idea. Okay, let's come back to this after the training. And
yeah, I think it's a good idea.
Okay, so one other issue that was brought up recently in the listserv was needing more details for graphic novels and comics on when to decide if you use one record versus a separate record. So this page does say that American origin graphic novels will often need separate records for each volume, and the Japanese ones need the single multi-volume record. I was thinking that maybe we should just add a sentence saying that if it has a separate part title, it should have a separate record.
Used to be there somewhere.
So the rule, as I remember it, as I asked at the catalogers meeting in 2019, was the way we do it, as far as I remember, is if it's not numbered, it's separate records. If it's only numbered, one record. If it's numbered and part title, they're separate records. I asked that we reevaluate the numbered plus part title thing, and we still haven't discussed that. It got sent off to the user experience group. And so anyway, those were the three examples. I don't think we should be making distinctions between American and Japanese. I mean, it's common, but
I agree. I know that it's common for the Japanese to be published as manga without a separate part title.
Right.
And just volume numbers. So that sounds like a good idea to just update it to describe those conditions.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I agree. Agreed. Violet.
Okay, so you've got agreement in the chat. I'll work on that for the next meeting. Okay, so we have been asked to review the bibliographic input standards page. Deborah would like this done every 3 years or so. I did ask you to review this before the meeting and see if there's any ideas of what you would like to update or change to this page for this week. And then if we do have ideas, we do need to bring this to governing board or executive committee to get approval of the changes. So have you found anything that you would like to update yet? We do have one update that we've already made. So what I've done so far is just change the 945 subfield B to be labeled as not required, with a note that it was approved during the CAM meeting to eliminate the requirement. But if you would like more time to review it and consider any other changes, we can move this to the next agenda.
That would be great.
Yeah, there's a lot to consider.
We can take as much time as we want throughout the year to review it. So we'll move that on to the next agenda.
can we do that by email?
Yes, we can. We can definitely discuss whatever you want by email. Feel free to email the listserv, the scrap listserv anytime with ideas so that we can discuss it throughout the year. So next on the agenda, we do have a proposal from Palatine to allow local diversity subject headings for all libraries. So how this differs from our current practice is that instead of adding them in the geographic format in the 691 with the city subfield X heading, this would be allowable for all libraries to use these headings so that all libraries would be able to benefit from this. So this could be beneficial to libraries that are doing diversity audits or for creating record sets, running queries to identify specific items, and could be of interest to all libraries, not just one specific library locally. So these headings that they propose are own voices, BIPOC author, BIPOC subject, LGBTQIA author and subject, neurodiverse author and subject, disability author and subject, intersectionality and diversity subject. So would someone from Palatine have anything else they'd like to add to what I've said so far?
Yeah, so I'll just give a little bit of context, and Violet is also here and she can chime in if I miss anything, but we are currently doing our diversity audit at Palatine. And one of the benefits of this would be that it would allow us to do subsequent audits and see how our collections are faring and if they're becoming more diverse, or because there's really no point in doing a diversity audit unless you're going to continue to review the collection. So this would be a helpful tool for doing that. And we do have some proposed definitions for these terms that one of our librarians came up with, just to allow us when we're doing the diversity audit so that we're all kind of on the same page. But I don't know if Violet has anything to add.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. I was having a little trouble this morning with my camera. So yeah, not much to add other than that, just to, we're checking these points of diversity as we're doing a diversity audit of a segment of our collection. And then we're going to add these as subject headings to materials that are coming in. So if they're not added in CCS, we'd be adding them as local subject headings. And then in 3 years, we're going to redo our audit to see what our improvements have been. So that's just kind of, it's not like we expect everyone to say, absolutely, add all of these. But I thought if it were of use to other libraries as well, I know a couple other libraries in CCS are doing diversity audits too. And, otherwise we would be fine with just adding them locally too.
Are these going to be 690s then?
Yes, they would need to be 690s.
And are you going to have any kind of controlled vocabulary? I mean, using so that you don't do something in a singular and something in a plural. You know what I mean? Because it might impede the searching will get confusing.
I think these terms that you see, those are the proposed.
Oh, those are the terms. Oh, okay.
So just picking one at random, say like disability author. Are we talking about somebody like Tammy Duckworth?
Yes.
Okay. So every time we get something by or about her, we would be adding that the heading disability author and or disability subject.
Right.
Okay.
One thing that is an option, instead of adding a subject heading for the authors, is to use the 386 field and use any of the characteristics that are allowable in the 386 field for demographic characteristics.
So I do have questions about that, Rachel, because I think maybe you have brought that up before. So where is that searchable? Is that indexed, or will that be part of this dashboard? that is forthcoming.
It's not indexed, but if we can get enough catalogers working on diversity audits to use it, it can be part of a dashboard. At the moment, it's only in like 200 records. So I do have some spreadsheets from Evanston that I can use to book add a 386 field to the records. But I haven't gotten to that yet. It's still just not a lot of records that actually have the 386 field yet, though.
I think that keeping this to just the bib records and just with these very broad terms, I think is probably the simplest way to go about this. I don't know what the discussions about that field have been within CCS, but in my last library, it was quite a point of contention. Yeah, I'm interested to hear what people have to say.
In a perfect world, all of those author headings would go in the authority records. Virginia, could we make a concerted effort to nationally update authority records?
To what?
Well, I don't know. I haven't gotten that far.
Okay. Yeah,
If you added something locally, would it get wiped out? If you added a 386 in an authority record, would it get wiped out by Marchive?
in authority record?
Yes.
No, because if I did it nationally, if
Okay,
I did
if
it
you did-
nationally, they would just,
Obviously. if you-
locally, I'd have to play.
Okay. Because I'm,
The
go ahead.
The 386 fields don't have to just be in the authority records. They are in bibliographic records. So that's what I would be bulk adding them to.
Is that visible to patrons?
It is not visible to patrons. It would be only useful to doing the diversity audit dashboard. I'd be able to create the dashboard with Bob for author characteristics.
There was a discussion on the PCC list a couple of years ago about author characteristics. And the suggestion was that it's only for collections in the bib record, like the one you showed there. And
Right.
Oxford Anthology of African American Poetry. Because otherwise we're going to have to remember that this person has a disability or is part of this group. And that's
a good point.
That's
right.
tough.
So here's one by Angela Davis, and it does have creator characteristics as African Americans and Americans.
And the suggestion was that's not necessary. I'm guessing it is an LC record, but who knows? It wasn't a unanimous vote on the discussion, but yeah, I'd be interested to see if that also appeared in her. Can we see her authority record?
It does not have a 386 in the authority record.
Oh, maybe
No.
emails.
Emails.
Good.
75. It would be a lot of work to update the authority records.
In the demographic terms for gender, it is currently just male and female, right?
No, Elliot Page was updated.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
But no, sorry. I mean, the terms that would be used.
You don't just have the ability to use the demographic terms. You can use Library of Congress subject headings. So here's a 386 where it's some field A Americans, some field A women, LCSH is the source code. So there's different options. You could even do local headings too. So I know that the genre term, or not the genre term, the demographic term, I think is actually blacks instead of black people. So we might want to, if we do this, we might want to say that we should add black people instead of blacks, or African American instead. So anything with the source code could be essentially added to this field in a bibliographic record.
The issue with adding, basically what we've been discussing all day, is adding new thesauruses. And
Right.
that's fine, but everyone has to be on board with it.
Right.
And again, I don't know what Angela Davis is. I don't know how to describe her. I don't know who she is. I would never know. I mean, I guess. And so that's why I would be more willing to do it in an authority record and do it once. And, you know, we can create updating record sets from authority records. You know, we could say, I've done the search to say, look in the authority records for this group, and then bring back all the bib records that Displays is attached to. I've done that search. I'll send it out this afternoon. That seems more useful than hodgepodge 690s.
I think the benefit of these proposed 690s is that they are limited. They're very, you know, bare bones. So it's not like we would have to debate whether it should be African Americans or Black people or Blacks or, you know, I mean, you can do that with any demographic group. So it's you get one choice and that's all you get. So it does take the cataloger's judgment out of the equation, which is kind of nice, actually.
If it was in the bibliographic record, I would say that it would make doing a diversity audit dashboard a bit easier for Bob, so that he would have a smaller amount of subject headings to look for authors. But it would also limit it because it would be limited to those specific categories. And I think this one on intersectionality is interesting because that's something that is not reflected in subject headings, and it's hard to do in an automated way with a diversity audit to create a dashboard.
What if we created a record set for each one of those terms?
Right. I would be able to bulk add these specific headings pretty easily into a 690 with the record sets that Bob has for the dashboard already, except for the author terms. I'd be able to add subject. I wouldn't be able to add author. Nor I wouldn't be able to add own voices either unless I was given a record set of own voices titles.
I mean, use the record set as a link.
Right.
For the catalog. And then everyone, it's still keeping up lists. But
Forgive me if this is an ignorant question, but is it possible to include local headings in the authority record?
It doesn't, yeah, Polaris doesn't let me authorize something. Well, I guess I could 690. I don't know why it doesn't like to authorize off of 690s. I don't know why, just the way Polaris works.
Because I was going to suggest that we could use that BIPOC author, LGBTQIA author, et cetera, in the authority records if there was an option for a local heading.
I mean, you could add some of these terms in the authority file, I mean, in the authority record itself, but and that's what you're saying, asking.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I'd have to do some playing around to make sure that if a heading goes archive doesn't, undo any changes.
Right.
But if it says 690, I don't think they would, but I can play. Actually, I'd have to play around with it.
So that would be an option too.
Would everyone want to think about this some more and come back to it next meeting?
Yes.
Okay.
Good idea.
Okay. So another topic I've been asked to research is if there are any other problematic LCSH headings that CCS should research and potentially consider replacing. So this is a topic that I think will require some additional research for everyone. Some options are in this list from Cataloging Lab. So it's something that you don't have to necessarily come up with any ideas today, but you might want to do some additional research into it. So any headings that do require replacements do need to be approved by governing board. So one that I am looking into is Indians of North America, if it would be worth changing that to Indigenous Peoples of North America. But I know this could be a difficult thing to change right now. There are other subdivisions with Indians in them that I saw.
Tons of headings with those. Remember, there's a lot of tons of C references and C alsos.
Yeah, so it could be quite an effort to change. And I've also noticed that the term Indians or Indian American is still being used a lot by various organizations, by the Indian or American Indian Center of Chicago. It's used by Smithsonian still, and it's used by Indian American newspapers are still calling themselves Indian American and not Native American. So there's still some research I want to do into that topic, but if you do have any other ideas or thoughts on specific terms that you are interested in changing, or even considering to change them, feel free to think about it over the next few months, and we can discuss that at the next meeting. Would anyone like to comment on it now? Since there are no other comments, are there any other items you'd like to add to the agenda to discuss?
John has his hand up.
I've noticed in the last few months that we've had genre heading creep, and things have started coming in like Spanish language materials, mystery and detective stories, graphic novels, United States, Sony video games, things like that. And we need to, I don't know what to do about that, because we used to have this under control and now we don't, and I don't know what happened.
Well, because I haven't maybe not been cleaning every little thing up.
Well,
there's
you
nothing-
shouldn't have to. We
Yeah,
should be getting it right. Most of
Right,
it.
exactly. Thank you. But I'm cleaning some up. I
Yeah.
mean, if I've got time, and also, we may, because, there's other things.
But things like, I'll see on a graphic novel, I'll see a 650 graphic novels United States. There's no easy way for you to clean that up. You have to look at the
No.
item, see, is
Yeah.
it or is it about? Most of the time it's about. I've been
Yeah.
deleting those as I see them, but
I can add a reminder to the next CAM meeting. I think
Yeah,
a lot of people are just not thinking about it and aren't removing the ones that actually are already in the records. I don't think they're necessarily adding anything new that's not allowable. I think they're just not deleting it.
I will second what Tammy said in the chat. I think that's part of the problem.
I think so too.
And I don't know when that started or why, but records are just being put in as is. There are those Midwest tape records that are essentially on order records. They don't mark them as such, but it'll be a big Hollywood movie and it'll be the title. The 245 will be the title and the director, and that's it. Like, I think we could trace the screenwriter. That would be nice. And, production company, those records aren't done, but they're just sent in as done. And so
I'm sure that when Palatine joined CCS, that some of our poorer quality records, they haven't been cleaned up, and I'm certainly working on it. But I think probably having 2 more libraries join the consortium has probably added to that.
yes, Tammy and I absolutely, and we understand new libraries, you work under different rules, we get that. And when we see old records, we'll fix them, but it's the new stuff. And as always, with any of these discussions, nobody's pointing fingers, nothing personal. It's just, we're making all this, we're making all this effort to add all these new genre headings, and we're struggling to deal with the ones that we've had forever. So.
And it's also to a certain extent, it's also, I'm bringing in lots of Coupa records, a couple hundred, and also Overdrive and stuff like that. When I'm bringing those kind of in, I'm not checking every single record, because there's thousands each month, or almost 1,000, whatever, almost like 800 a month. And so I can't look at every record. I try to make sure I grab all, change, make sure our love stories is changed to romance fiction and things like that, and update some of the genre headings. But I don't get every chance to look at every nuance of every genre heading, and things like that.
Yeah,
too.
I don't
Sorry.
look at any of the, I wasn't talking about any of the e-records. I don't
Yeah.
look at those, except when I watched a movie online and then I fixed the bit record. That's one. But no, this is for actual things that the catalogers that we
should be. Yeah, you guys should be.
The e stuff that's hopeless.
Yeah, it is.
I think the idea of a reminder at the next CAM meeting is good.
Yeah, I'll just, I'll include a general quality reminder to try to remind everyone to review the whole of record. I've definitely noticed an issue with inconsistent pagination when I'm deduplicating records.
Tammy is a good remark, something to remind people about. Don't just assume if you got everything's correct, it's correct. Don't assume with holdings everything's perfect.
I noticed something on one of the records that we saw just now in one of the examples. It had the subject heading 1920s fiction. And I don't know that we need to discuss that, because I don't think that's helpful or being applied consistently.
Yeah, I didn't even know if that was a real genre heading.
Well,
No,
it's subject heading. It was in the Angela Davis, was that the?
Oh, was it 1920s?
no, that's not a subject
It
heading.
was in the queer fiction example.
It's not
Because it was a,
it's not a subject heading. 1920 would not be, it would be written out if anything.
Right, it's 1920s spelled out.
Yeah, it would be written.
Then
Spelled out with the letters?
right.
Yeah, it won't,
It's
you won't put that as a subject heading. You won't put.
it's a valid
1920.
subject heading, but people are using it as a chronological something.
Oh, 1920s subfield fiction.
WLV fiction. And there's a field for that, I think. 370 something, maybe? I don't know.
It is a heading that's
But
allowable.
I don't think this was about the 1920s. I think it was set in the 1920s.
Yeah, yeah, right, exactly.
Which-
1920s, they're thinking of like Prohibition or the Roaring 20s or something like that. When not.
Just
A
do a
book of-
browse search. Do a browse search in the client. You'll see.
No one searches like that anyway. That's not fiction. Well, there's a lot to look through to find when that would be fiction. Maybe this one is Russian, but control number.
Brad has a good idea. Go by it.
Okay, so John, can you repeat what you were saying about this issue?
Well, I could almost make a case in this case. People are using, and this is in OCLC, people are using that string, 1920s fiction, to indicate the time period, to indicate the setting. And I'm suggesting that we should talk about that because we're not all doing it. it's problematic if something's set in 1927, do we put 1927 fiction? Is this useful? This one I could actually kind of make a case if the author is making a comment about the 1920s. But even then,
I can definitely see this one as needing that subject heading, though. I do see that it would be useful for Fitzgerald's work.
Where is it?
but you know, well, okay. No, you know, if you just have some random novel that's set in 1984, are we adding 1984 fiction to every one of those?
No.
Okay. Uh-huh.
1920s fiction, yeah. But that's all right, you can see it. I think that one sort of illustrates John's point.
It's hard for me to comment on this without like actually reading it. It's hard to say with just a summary. But it is an adaptation of Great Gatsby. Which may be why they added it.
Well, pick a different decade, pick a year. I don't know.
Right.
Would it, like, not every adaptation takes place in the same time period, like it could be an adaptation that takes place in current times. So
Right.
you'd have to know that this book actually took place back in the 1920s. And if it does, then that's a good way of letting you know that it does, but just have to be careful with that.
Maybe there's something else, the reminder type of thing, quality, you know, watch what you're doing.
Right. I can just add a reminder that it's about the subject of the fiction, not about the time period.
Okay.
Is there anything else? Okay, well, since there's nothing else, we may as well adjourn the meeting, and I will get the minutes completed as soon as I can.
Okay.
So have a good day, everyone.
You too. Thank you.
Okay,
Goodbye, everybody.
bye.
Bye.